You wake up in silk sheets that cost more than most people's houses, wearing jewelry that could buy a small army, and realize with growing horror that your survival depends entirely on how well you can recite poetry while looking devastatingly attractive. Welcome to your new life as a male concubine in ancient Greece, where being beautiful is a full-time job and one boring conversation could get you sold to a copper merchant in Crete. Hey everyone, welcome back to Sleepover with History. I'm Thomas, your guide for tonight's journey into one of ancient Greece's most fascinating and completely misunderstood institutions. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you enjoy these historical deep dives, and subscribe if you haven't already, but only if you genuinely find value in what we do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now get comfortable, dim the lights, and prepare to discover that ancient Greek society was far more complex than marble statues and philosophical debates. Tonight we're exploring what it would really mean to wake up as a male concubine, not just decoration, but tutor, confidant, political advisor, and status symbol, all wrapped into one very precarious position, where your wit matters more than your strength, and one wrong word could mean exile, or worse. Ready? Let's dive in. So you've woken up, and the first thing you notice isn't the luxury, it's the panic. Because luxury in ancient Greece came with strings attached, and those strings are now wrapped around your throat, like the finest Persian silk. You're not just wealthy, you're owned. And the person who owns you, they didn't buy you for your charming personality, though that better be charming too. Let's set the scene properly. You're in Athens, around 450 BCE, during the height of the Golden Age. Pericles is building the Parthenon, democracy is thriving, and philosophers are wandering around asking uncomfortable questions about the nature of existence. Meanwhile, you're lying in a bed that probably cost more than most citizens make in a year, wondering how exactly you ended up as living property. The room around you screams wealth in the most obnoxious way possible. The walls are painted with scenes of gods doing god things, Zeus transforming into various animals to seduce mortals, Athena sprouting from someone's head fully armed, Apollo being annoyingly perfect at everything. The floor is covered in mosaics, so intricate you're afraid to step on them, and everywhere, cold, golden goblets, golden jewelry, golden chamber pots, because apparently even your waist needs to be luxurious. But here's the thing about all this opulence, none of it belongs to you. You're like a very expensive pet, who happens to be able to discuss Homeric verse and play the lyre. You're surrounded by wealth but you own nothing, not even yourself. The silk sheets you're tangled in, imported from the Far East at enormous expense, the jewelry adorning your wrists and ankles, each piece worth more than a small farm, the perfumed oil glistening on your skin, made from flowers that only bloom once a year on a specific hill outside Corinth. You are, quite literally, a walking advertisement for your owner's wealth and taste. And speaking of your owner, let's talk about who exactly thought it was a good idea to purchase a human being as a conversation piece. The door opens, and in walks your owner, let's call him Callias, because every wealthy Athenian was named either Callias, Nicias, or some variation of blessed by the gods. He's middle-aged, which in ancient Greece means he's about 35, and already complaining about his back. He's wearing a chiton that costs more than most people's houses, and he has that particular look of someone who's never worked a day in his life, but somehow thinks he's earned everything he has. Callias isn't just wealthy, he's political wealthy. His family has been influential in Athens for generations, which means they've been stepping on other people's faces for so long they've forgotten there are faces down there. He owns silver mines, ships, olive groves, and apparently you. He's the kind of man who thinks owning beautiful things makes him beautiful by association. But here's where it gets complicated, because Callias didn't just buy you to look pretty at dinner parties. No, that would be too simple. You see, in ancient Greece, male concubines weren't just decorative objects. They were expected to be the complete package. Beautiful, yes, but also educated, witty, politically aware, artistically talented, and capable of holding intelligent conversation about everything from military strategy to the proper way to sacrifice a goat to Dionysus. Think of it as being a trophy wife, personal tutor, entertainment system, and political advisor all rolled into one very attractive package. No pressure. Callias approaches you with that proprietary smile that wealthy men have when they're admiring their possessions. He's already dressed for the day, which means he's expecting you to be ready to perform whatever role he needs. Scholar, companion, arm candy, or political sounding board. And you better be good at all of them, because disappointing a man like Callias isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. "Ah, you're awake," he says, and his tone is friendly enough, but there's an undertone that reminds you exactly what your position is here. "We have guests coming today. Important guests. I trust you remember what we discussed about the proper way to greet the strategos. You don't remember, because you weren't here yesterday, but you nod anyway. Rule number 1 of being a concubine: never admit ignorance. Rule number 2: figure it out fast." Before you can even think about breakfast, you're whisked away by Philippus, the household slave who manages all of Callias's beautiful things. And yes, that includes you. Philippus is about 50, has been with the family since he was your age, and has the resigned expression of someone who's seen 3 generations of wealthy men make the same stupid mistakes over and over again. "First things first," he says, leading you to a room that's part library, part torture chamber, and part beauty salon. You need to understand what you are and what's expected of you. What you are, apparently, is a heteros, a male companion. Not a slave, technically, but not free either. You exist in that grey area between property and person that ancient societies loved to create to make themselves feel better about owning human beings. You have certain privileges, certain protections, and certain expectations that will either elevate you to positions of real influence or get you killed in very creative ways. The education begins immediately. First, literature. You need to know Homer forwards and backwards, not just because it's cultured, but because wealthy Greeks love to quote the Iliad during dinner conversations, and you're expected to catch the references and respond with appropriate verses. Get it wrong, and you're not just ignorant, you're embarrassing. Then philosophy. Socrates is wandering around Athens asking irritating questions, and his ideas are spreading among the educated classes. You need to understand the basics of what he's saying, even if half of it sounds like the ramblings of a man who's been drinking too much wine and thinking too many thoughts. But wealthy men love to discuss the nature of justice and virtue, especially after they've spent the day exploiting their workers and bribing officials. History comes next. You need to know not just what happened, but why it happened, and how it affects current politics. Athens is constantly at war with someone, Sparta, Persia, various city-states that looked at them funny, and your owner will expect you to discuss military campaigns with the intelligence of a general and the insight of a historian. Mathematics, astronomy, music, rhetoric, it all piles on. You're expected to be a walking encyclopedia of human knowledge, but prettier and with better conversation skills. But here's the twist: you can't be too smart. Show up your owner in front of his friends, and you'll find yourself on a boat to some remote island where the only conversation partners are goats and the occasional confused sailor. The art is in being intelligent enough to impress, educated enough to contribute, but never so brilliant that you make your owner look stupid by comparison. It's like being a court jester, but instead of making jokes, you're making everyone feel sophisticated. While your mind is being stuffed with knowledge, your body is being prepared for display. And when I say prepared, I mean subjected to a beauty routine that would make modern spa enthusiasts weep with exhaustion. First, the bath. Not a quick rinse, but a full-scale production involving multiple types of soap oils that smell like they were extracted from the dreams of gods, and water heated to the exact temperature that promotes circulation without causing perspiration. You're scrubbed with pumice stones until your skin is softer than a baby's cheek and possibly just as pink. Then comes the oil treatment. Every inch of your body is massaged with olive oil infused with various herbs, flowers, and substances that probably cost more than most people make in a month. The goal is to make your skin glow like you're lit from within by divine light. The reality is that you're so slippery that sitting down becomes an engineering challenge. Hair care in ancient Greece was serious business. Your hair is washed with specialized soaps, conditioned with treatments made from exotic plants, and styled with hot irons and various torture devices designed to create perfect curls. If you have naturally straight hair, they curl it. If you have curly hair, they straighten it. The goal is always to have whatever you don't naturally have, because apparently the gods made everyone wrong, and only wealthy Greeks know how to fix it. Makeup comes next, and yes, men wore makeup in ancient Greece. Not just a little bit full theatrical production makeup. Your eyes are lined with kohl to make them seem larger and more expressive. Your skin is dusted with powder to create that perfect alabaster complexion that suggests you're too refined to spend time in the sun like a common laborer. Your lips are tinted with various plant-based dyes to give you that naturally flushed with health and vitality look that requires extensive artificial intervention to achieve. And the jewelry. Oh, the jewelry. Rings on your fingers, bracelets on your wrists, chains around your neck, and probably a decorative belt that serves no functional purpose except to display wealth. Each piece is carefully selected to complement your outfit and demonstrate your owner's excellent taste in beautiful things. The final touch is perfume. Not just any perfume, but custom blends created specifically for you. Different scents for different occasions, something light and floral for morning conversations, something deeper and more mysterious for evening entertainment, something that suggests intelligence and sophistication for political discussions. By the time they're finished with you, you look like a work of art. You also feel like a work of art, you beautiful, valuable, and completely artificial. Now that you're properly educated, and sufficiently beautiful, it's time to learn the most important skill of all, navigating household politics. Because Callias's house isn't just a home, it's a political organism with its own ecosystem of power, rivalry, and barely contained chaos. First there's Callias's wife Aspasia. Yes, she has the same name as Pericles' famous companion, because wealthy Greeks weren't particularly creative with names. Aspasia is about 25, which means she's practically ancient by ancient Greek standards for women, and she has the sharp intelligence of someone who's learned to wield influence through subtlety rather than direct power. She doesn't hate you exactly, but she doesn't love having living proof of her husband's diverse interests, walking around the house looking better than she does. At the same time, she recognizes that your sentimental and status symbols reflect well on the entire household. It's complicated. Then there are the legitimate children, 2 sons and a daughter, all of whom have been raised to believe they're destined for greatness, and are currently trying to figure out where you fit in their understanding of how the world works. The oldest son, Cleomenes, is about your age, and deeply resentful that his father's companion is younger, better educated, and significantly better looking than he is. The daughter, Penthesilea, is fascinated by you in the way that sheltered young people are fascinated by anything exotic and slightly scandalous. The household slaves present their own challenges. Some see you as a privileged outsider who gets to enjoy luxury without earning it. Others view you as a potential ally, now someone who might have the owner's ear and could influence decisions in their favor. A few regard you with the resigned acceptance of people who've seen wealthy men's obsessions come and go and know that outlasting them is just part of the job. But the real political minefield is the other companions. Because Callias, like most wealthy Greek men, doesn't limit himself to just one beautiful young person. There's Marcus, a sweet boy from a good family who fell on hard times and sold himself into companionship to pay his father's debts. He's been here 3 years, and has the comfortable confidence of someone who knows his position is secure. Then there's Demetrius, who's newer than you but more experienced in the art of being decoratively useful. He plays the flute like an angel, and can discuss military strategy with actual generals without embarrassing himself. You're the newest addition to this carefully balanced ecosystem, and everyone is watching to see how you'll upset the equilibrium. Will you try to become the favorite? Will you form alliances? Will you attempt to eliminate the competition through subtle manipulation and strategic positioning? The truth is, you don't have a choice. This isn't a friendly household where everyone gets along minds. It's a political unit where your survival depends on being useful, being liked, and being careful never to be too much of either. 3 days into your new life, Callias announces that you'll be accompanying him to a symposium at the house of Nicias, a prominent general and politician. If you think this sounds like a friendly dinner party, you're adorably naive. A Greek symposium is part intellectual salon, part political strategy session, and part performance art, with a healthy dose of competitive drinking thrown in to keep things interesting. Preparation begins hours beforehand. You're bathed, oiled, perfumed, and dressed in a chiton so fine it's practically transparent. The goal is to look effortlessly beautiful, while also suggesting intellectual depth and cultural refinement. It's like being asked to appear simultaneously seductive and scholarly, which is about as easy as it sounds. Philippus briefs you on who will be there and what topics are likely to come up. Nicias himself is a cautious general who prefers defensive strategies and has strong opinions about the ongoing conflict with Sparta. His companion, a young man named Alcibiades, is reportedly brilliant but unpredictable. There will be several other prominent citizens, each with their own political positions, personal grudges, and carefully cultivated public images. Remember, Philippus warns, your job is to make Callias look good, be intelligent, but not intimidating. Be beautiful, but not distracting. Be charming, but not manipulative. Be interested, but not presumptuous. So basically, be perfect while pretending you're not trying to be perfect. The symposium takes place in Nicias's Andron, the men's dining room, which is decorated with frescoes depicting heroic battles and divine interventions. The couches are arranged in a rectangle, and you're positioned next to Callias where you can participate in conversation, but clearly belong to someone. The evening begins with dinner, course after course of elaborate dishes, designed to showcase the host's wealth and taste. Roasted peacock, honeyed figs, wine aged in amphoras that cost more than most people's annual income. You eat carefully, mindful that everything you do reflects on your owner. Then the real entertainment begins. Philosophy, politics, poetry, and personal gossip blend together in a conversational cocktail that requires you to be simultaneously engaged and cautious. Someone quotes Heraclitus, and you're expected to respond with a relevant passage from Pindar. The conversation shifts to military strategy, and you need to demonstrate knowledge without appearing to have opinions above your station. Alcibiades, Nicias's companion, is everything you've been warned about: Bias, brilliant, beautiful, and dangerously charismatic. He speaks with the confidence of someone who's never been told he can't have something, and his insights into Athenian politics are both impressive and slightly treasonous. You find yourself genuinely enjoying the intellectual sparring, which is probably exactly what you're not supposed to do. The wine flows freely, and the conversation becomes more heated. Someone criticizes Pericles' building projects as wasteful vanity. Someone else defends them as necessary for Athenian prestige. You contribute a carefully neutral observation about the economic benefits of public works projects, and several people nod approvingly. That's when you realize you're actually good at this. The education, the training, the careful balance of intelligence and deference, it's working. You're contributing meaningfully to sophisticated political discourse while maintaining your position as decorative property. It's deeply weird, but also oddly satisfying. But as the evening progresses, you begin to understand the real purpose of these gatherings. They're not just social events, they're intelligence-gathering operations. Every casual comment, every seemingly innocent question, every shared confidence is being catalogued and analyzed for political advantage. And you're not just a participant in this information market, you're a commodity in it. Your observations, your insights, your access to private conversations with other wealthy men's companions, all of it has value. Callias isn't just showing you off, he's mining you for intelligence. The morning after the symposium, you wake up with a headache that has nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with the realization of what your life has become. You're not just a beautiful object, or even a sophisticated conversation partner, you're a spy. A very well-dressed, extensively educated, thoroughly perfumed spy, but a spy nonetheless. Callias summons you to his private study, a room lined with scrolls, maps and documents that probably contain enough political secrets to overthrow the government twice. He's pleased with your performance at the symposium, which would be flattering if it weren't so terrifying. Alcibiades was quite taken with you, he says, watching your reaction carefully. He asks several questions about your background, your education, your availability for private conversation. This is the moment when you realize that your beauty and intelligence aren't just assets, they're weapons. Callias is considering loaning you out to other powerful men, not for their entertainment, but for information gathering. You would become a living, breathing intelligence network, collecting secrets from the bedchambers and private conversations of Athens' most influential citizens. The implications are staggering. On one hand, this could elevate your status considerably. You would gain access to the highest levels of Athenian society, become privy to political machinations that shape the fate of the entire Mediterranean world, and potentially accumulate enough influence to secure your own position permanently. On the other hand, you would be walking into a world where a single mistake could result in exile, assassination, or something even more creative and unpleasant. Ancient Greek politics weren't known for their forgiving nature, and people who knew too much had a tendency to suffer from sudden and mysterious ailments. But you don't really have a choice, do you? Refusing would suggest that you don't trust Callias's judgment, which would be insulting. It would also indicate that you don't understand your position, which would be stupid. And stupidity, in your current situation, is a luxury you literally cannot afford. So you nod, you smile, you express gratitude for the opportunity to serve in whatever capacity would best benefit the household. Inside, you're calculating survival strategies and wondering if there's a polite way to ask about the life expectancy of previous companions who've been assigned similar duties. Excellent, Callias says, and his smile has that predatory quality that wealthy men develop when they're particularly pleased with their possessions. Alcibiades has invited you to attend a private gathering tomorrow evening. A small group of young men discussing philosophy and poetry, very intellectual, very intimate. The way he says intimate suggests that philosophy and poetry might not be the primary activities on the agenda. You're being sent to seduce information out of some of the most dangerous and intelligent young men in Athens. It's like being asked to play chess with people who invented the game, using rules you don't fully understand, for stakes that could include your life. No pressure at all. The private gathering takes place at a villa outside Athens, surrounded by olive groves and far enough from the city to ensure that whatever happens there won't be observed by casual passers-by. The location alone suggests that this isn't going to be a simple evening of intellectual discourse. You arrive dressed more modestly than usual, still beautiful, still expensive, but with an air of scholarly seriousness that suggests you're here for the conversation rather than the entertainment. It's a delicate balance, and you're not entirely sure you've struck it correctly until Alcibiades greets you with genuine warmth and what appears to be actual interest in your thoughts on recent developments in Athenian politics. The other guests are a carefully selected group of young aristocrats, military officers, and rising political figures. Each one represents a different faction or interest group within Athenian society, and the evening feels less like a social gathering, and more like a diplomatic summit disguised as a philosophy club. The conversation ranges across topics with the fluid complexity of genuine intellectual discourse. Someone raises questions about the nature of justice, and the discussion evolves into a debate about Athens' treatment of its subject cities. A comment about the relationship between beauty and virtue leads to a surprisingly sophisticated analysis of the role of aesthetic education in political leadership. You contribute carefully, offering insights that demonstrate your education without revealing too much about your own political opinions. Because the truth is, you're beginning to develop political opinions, and some of them are probably treasonous. Spending your days listening to wealthy men discuss policy has given you a perspective on Athenian democracy that's both insider and outsider. You see how decisions are really made, who actually has influence, and how the gap between democratic ideals and political reality is bridged by networks of personal relationships, mutual obligations, and carefully managed information. And some of what you see is deeply disturbing. The evening progresses, and the conversations become more personal, more revealing. Someone mentions a planned military expedition that hasn't been announced publicly. Someone else shares concerns about growing unrest among the city's allies. A young officer describes corruption in military supply contracts with the casual acceptance of someone who considers it normal business practice. You listen, you remember, and you begin to understand that you're not just gathering gossip, you're collecting intelligence that could affect the lives of thousands of people. The casual comment about supply corruption could indicate that Athens' military is less prepared than it appears. The concerns about allied unrest could suggest that the empire is more fragile than its citizens realize. But the most disturbing realization is how much you're enjoying this. The intellectual stimulation, the sense of importance, the access to information that shapes the fate of nations. It's intoxicating. You're beginning to understand why some people choose this life, even with all its dangers and moral ambiguities. As the evening winds down, Alcibiades draws you aside for a private conversation. He's been drinking, but his eyes are sharp and calculating. "You're wasted on Callias," he says quietly. "A mind like yours should be engaged with more challenging problems." It's not quite an offer, but it's not an offer either. And the way he looks at you suggests that he sees you as more than just a beautiful decoration with intellectual pretensions. He sees you as a potential partner in whatever schemes he's developing behind those brilliant, dangerous eyes. You thank him for the compliment, express loyalty to your current household, and carefully extract yourself from the conversation without closing any doors or making any commitments. It's a diplomatic masterpiece that would make professional ambassadors proud. But as you return to Callias's house in the pre-dawn darkness, you can't shake the feeling that you've just taken the first step down a path that leads to places you're not sure you want to go. The problem is, you're not entirely sure you want to avoid them either. 3 weeks into your new career as a decorative intelligence asset, you're beginning to understand that beauty in ancient Greece isn't just an advantage, it's a responsibility, a vulnerability, and a constantly depreciating resource, all rolled into one perfectly oiled package. Your daily beauty routine has become a part-time job. 2 hours every morning for bathing, massage, hairstyling, and makeup application. Another hour in the evening for maintenance and preparation for the next day. Your skincare regimen involves more products than most apothecaries stock, and each one serves a specific purpose in maintaining the illusion that you naturally look like a god who's taken human form for purely recreational purposes. But here's what nobody tells you about being professionally beautiful. It's exhausting. Every meal has to be calculated for its effects on your complexion. Every activity has to be evaluated for its impact on your physical condition. You can't just go for a walk without considering sun exposure. You can't enjoy a meal without thinking about how it will affect your digestion, which will affect your skin, which will affect your market value. Because that's what you are now, a commodity whose price fluctuates based on physical condition, intellectual performance, and social positioning. And like all commodities, you're subject to market forces beyond your control. The other companions in Callias's household have taught you to read the signs of declining favor. When your owner starts mentioning how well-educated the new young men from Corinth are, that's not casual conversation. That's market research. When he begins asking about your opinions on living arrangements, he's not interested in your comfort. He's calculating whether you're worth the cost of maintaining. Marcus, the sweet boy who's been in the household for 3 years, is beginning to show signs of wear, not physical deterioration. He's still beautiful, but the kind of subtle aging that happens when someone spends their days being ornamental. There's a slight stiffness to his smile, a practiced quality to his laugh, a way of contributing to conversations that suggests he's said the same intelligent things so many times they've lost all meaning for him. Demetrius handles the pressure differently. He's developed an almost manic energy, constantly perfecting new skills, learning new topics, finding new ways to make himself indispensable. He practices his flute playing with the dedication of someone who knows that musical ability might be the only thing standing between him and a one-way trip to a copper mine in Thrace. And you're discovering that you have a talent for this life that's both blessing and curse. You're good at reading people, at remembering important details, at contributing meaningfully to sophisticated conversations, while maintaining the careful balance of intelligence and deference that your position requires. You're becoming genuinely valuable, which should be reassuring, but somehow makes everything more terrifying. Because valuable things attract attention, and attention in your position can be either salvation or destruction, depending on who's doing the looking. 6 weeks in, and you've become a regular feature on Athens' symposium circuit. Callias lends you out like a prized racing horse, and you perform intellectual tricks for the entertainment and edification of the city's most powerful men. You can discuss philosophy with sophists, debate military strategy with generals, and analyze poetry with Athens' finest scholars, all while looking like you were carved from marble by a sculptor with particularly good taste in human anatomy. Each symposium has its own character, its own political undercurrents, its own unspoken rules about what can and cannot be discussed. At Nicaeus's gatherings, the conversation tends toward careful conservative analysis of current events. At Alcibiades' more exclusive parties, the discussions veer into dangerously radical territory that would probably qualify as treason if anyone were taking official notes. You've learned to read the room, to gauge the political temperature, to contribute insights that align with the host's preferences, without compromising your reputation for independent thought. It's like being a political chameleon, but one that has to maintain consistent personal branding across multiple appearances. The information you gather during these evenings has become increasingly valuable to Callias. You bring back gossip about political alliances, advance notice of policy proposals, insights into the personal relationships that drive public decisions. You're becoming a living intelligence network, and your reports are apparently sought after by people whose names you're not allowed to know. But the more successful you become, the more dangerous your position grows. Because information is power, and power makes people nervous. You're beginning to notice certain patterns in the invitations you receive, the conversations you're included in, the casual questions that other companions ask about your activities. It's entirely possible that you're being used to gather intelligence while simultaneously being monitored for the intelligence you might be sharing with others. Ancient Greek politics were notoriously complex, and trust was a luxury that most people couldn't afford. The realization that you're probably being watched by multiple parties, all of whom have different and potentially conflicting interests in your activities, adds a new layer of stress to an already complicated existence. Every conversation becomes a performance not just for the immediate audience, but for unknown observers who might be analyzing your words for signs of disloyalty, unreliability, or excessive independence. You're walking a tightrope strung between competing interests, and the only thing preventing a fall is your ability to remain useful to everyone, while becoming threatening to no one. It's the kind of balance that requires constant attention and perfect execution, because a single mistake could result in consequences you prefer not to contemplate. 2 months into your life as a professional companion, you're forced to confront a truth that your training didn't quite prepare you for. You're actually enjoying parts of this existence, and that enjoyment is perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. The intellectual stimulation is genuinely engaging. After a lifetime of whatever mundane existence you had before this, being immersed in discussions of philosophy, politics, and art with some of the most brilliant minds in the ancient world is intoxicating. You find yourself looking forward to the challenge of matching wits with accomplished scholars, the satisfaction of contributing meaningful insights to important conversations, the thrill of being treated as an intellectual equal by people whose ideas shape civilization. But there's a darker side to this enjoyment that you're only beginning to understand. The power dynamics that initially seemed so clear-cut are revealing layers of complexity that make your head spin. You have influence, but it's indirect and dependent on maintaining the goodwill of people who could destroy you on a whim. You have access to information that affects the lives of thousands, but you can't use it for your own benefit without risking everything. Most disturbing of all, you're developing genuine affection for some of the people in your orbit. Callias, despite his possessive nature and political ruthlessness, has moments of kindness and intellectual generosity that remind you that he's a human being rather than just a wealthy manipulator. Some of the other companions have become real friends, people you care about and worry over, and genuinely enjoy spending time with. This emotional investment makes everything more complicated. It's easier to navigate a world of pure transaction and manipulation than one where you actually care about the outcomes for people you've grown to like. When Callias asks you to gather information about someone you've come to respect, the moral weight of the request is much heavier than when everyone involved was just a chess piece in someone else's game. The other companions have noticed your growing sophistication and apparent comfort with your role, and their reactions vary. Marcus seems relieved that someone else is taking on the more demanding assignments, giving him space to settle into the role of reliable household fixture. Demetrius views you with a mixture of admiration and wariness, recognizing both a potential ally and a possible threat to his own position. But it's the reaction of the household's legitimate family members that's most revealing. Aspasia has begun treating you less like decorative property, and more like a member of the household staff whose opinions might actually matter. The children have started asking you questions about politics and philosophy, treating you as a source of adult wisdom rather than an exotic curiosity. This gradual shift in your social position within the household is simultaneously gratifying and terrifying. Being treated with more respect and consideration is pleasant, but it also means that expectations are higher, and the consequences of failure are more severe. When you're just a beautiful object, mistakes can be overlooked or excused. When you're seen as a functioning member of a political household, errors in judgment become matters of serious concern. 3 months in, and you're beginning to understand that Athenian politics isn't just complicated, it's actively hostile to anyone who doesn't have multiple backup plans and a detailed understanding of who owes what to whom, going back at least 3 generations. Your position as a high-end companion has given you access to information about the personal relationships that drive public policy, and the picture that emerges is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Athens may be a democracy in theory, but in practice it's run by a relatively small group of wealthy families who've been maneuvering for advantage since before democracy was invented. Callias's political position is more precarious than you initially realized. His wealth comes primarily from silver mining operations that depend on maintaining good relationships with both Athenian authorities and the foreign workers who actually do the dangerous job of extracting precious metals from underground death traps. His political influence stems from his ability to fund public projects and military expeditions, but that funding capacity is tied to the continued profitability of businesses that could be disrupted by changes in trade relationships, military conflicts, or shifts in public policy. This means that every political position he takes, every alliance he forms, every enemy he makes, has direct implications for his economic survival. And since your well-being is tied to his continued prosperity, you have a personal stake in understanding and potentially influencing these high-level political calculations. The information you gather at symposiums has become increasingly sophisticated. You're not just collecting gossip anymore, you're tracking policy proposals, monitoring alliance formations, and analyzing the personal relationships that determine how Athenian democracy actually functions. Your reports to Callias have evolved from simple social observations to detailed political intelligence assessments, but this elevated role comes with elevated risks. Other political households have noticed your activities and begun making their own moves to either co-opt your services or neutralize your effectiveness. You've received invitations to exclusive gatherings hosted by Callias's rivals, offers of private employment that would remove you from your current position, and subtle threats disguised as friendly warnings about the dangers facing young people who become too involved in political affairs. The most unsettling development is the realization that you're being courted by representatives of political factions that operate in the shadows of Athenian democracy. These are groups that have interests in maintaining or disrupting the current political order, and they see your access to high-level political conversations as potentially valuable for their purposes. Alcibiades has been particularly persistent in his efforts to recruit you for purposes that remain deliberately vague. His invitations have become more frequent, his private conversations more pointed, and his suggestions about your potential for independent political action more explicit. He's offering you a kind of freedom that would involve trading your current dependent status for a different kind of dependency, one that might offer more autonomy, but would definitely involve more danger. The choice he's presenting is seductive in its simplicity: remain a beautiful ornament in Callias's political household, or become an active player in the game that shapes the fate of Athens. But you're beginning to suspect that the choice itself might be an illusion, and that your current position has already made you a player, whether you want to be one or not. 4 months into your career as a decorative intelligence asset, you've developed your own philosophical framework for survival in ancient Greek high society. It's not the kind of philosophy that Socrates would approve of. It's far too practical and morally flexible, but it keeps you alive, fed, and beautiful, which are your primary concerns at the moment. The first principle is adaptability. Every situation requires a different version of yourself, and the key to survival is being able to shift between these versions smoothly and convincingly. With Callias, you're the devoted companion who values loyalty above all else. With Alcibiades, you're the independent thinker who might be persuaded to consider new opportunities. With the legitimate family members, you're the respectful household fixture who knows his place, but can offer valuable insights when asked. None of these personas is false. Exactly, nah, they're all aspects of who you're becoming in response to the demands of your environment. But the constant shape-shifting is exhausting, and you sometimes wonder if there's still a core self underneath all the performed personalities. The second principle is information management. Everything you learn has value, but not all information should be shared with everyone who might want it. You've developed a complex system for categorizing what you know based on its potential usefulness to different parties, its sensitivity level, and the risks involved in sharing it. Some gossip gets passed along immediately. Some observations are filed away for future use. Some secrets go with you to whatever grave awaits failed companions. The third principle is relationship cultivation. Every person you meet is a potential asset, enemy, or neutral party, and those designations can change rapidly based on shifting circumstances. You invest time and effort in maintaining friendly relations with people who seem insignificant now, but might become important later. You avoid making unnecessary enemies, while also being careful not to appear too eager to please everyone. The fourth principle is aesthetic maintenance. Your physical appearance is your primary currency, and letting it deteriorate is essentially declaring bankruptcy. This means constant attention to diet, exercise, grooming, and presentation, even when you're tired, stressed, or dealing with the various ailments that come from living a life of carefully managed performance. The fifth and most important principle is strategic patience. You're playing a long game in a world where most people think in terms of immediate advantage. Your goal isn't to maximize short-term gains. It's to position yourself for survival and potential advancement over years or decades. This means accepting current limitations while working to gradually improve your situation through careful planning and consistent execution. These principles have served you well so far, but you're beginning to recognize their limitations. The world you're operating in is changing rapidly, and the strategies that work today might be useless or even dangerous tomorrow. Athens is at war, political alliances are shifting, and the economic foundations that support your current lifestyle are less stable than they appear. More importantly, you're changing. The person who developed these survival strategies 4 months ago had different knowledge, different relationships, and different options than you have now. Your growing sophistication and expanding network of contacts are creating new possibilities, but they're also exposing you to new types of risk. 5 months in, and you're facing a crisis that your philosophical framework didn't prepare you for success. You've become genuinely valuable to multiple parties, which should be reassuring, but instead feels like being pulled apart by competing gravitational forces. Callias has begun treating you less like property and more like a junior partner in his political enterprises. He consults you on matters of strategy, asks for your assessment of other political figures, and includes you in planning discussions that shape his public positions. This elevation in status comes with better living arrangements, more personal autonomy, and the kind of respect that you'd never imagined possible in your current situation. But this success has attracted attention from people whose interest in your services isn't entirely benevolent. You've received discreet inquiries from representatives of other political households, offers of employment that would require breaking your current arrangements, and invitations to social gatherings that feel more like recruitment attempts than friendly socializing. Most concerning of all, you've begun to suspect that some of your fellow companions are reporting on your activities to parties unknown. The questions they ask about your daily schedule, the casual interest they show in your conversations with Callias, the way certain topics come up repeatedly in different contexts. It all suggests that you're being monitored by people who aren't entirely satisfied with your current loyalties. This paranoia might be justified, or it might be the natural result of spending months immersed in a world where everyone is constantly maneuvering for advantage, and information is the primary currency. But justified or not, the stress of constantly evaluating every interaction for hidden agendas is beginning to wear on you. The other problem with success is that it creates expectations. Callias now assumes that you can handle increasingly complex and sensitive assignments. Other political figures expect you to contribute meaningfully to sophisticated discussions. Your fellow companions look to you for leadership and guidance in navigating household politics. These expectations would be flattering if they weren't so terrifying. Every assignment carries the risk of failure, and failure at your current level wouldn't just mean disappointment, it would mean disgrace, exile, or worse. The margin for error has shrunk as your responsibilities have expanded, and the consequences of mistakes have become correspondingly more severe. You're also beginning to understand that your success has been built on a foundation that might not be as solid as it appears. Callias's political position, while strong, depends on maintaining a complex web of relationships that could be disrupted by changes in Athens' military fortunes, shifts in public opinion, or the emergence of new political figures with different priorities and allegiances. If Callias falls from favor, your position falls with him, and the higher you've risen in his estimation, the farther you have to fall. The other companions who've maintained lower profiles might weather political storms more easily than you would with your current high-visibility role. 6 months into your transformation from whatever you were before to whatever you're becoming now, you catch sight of yourself in a polished bronze mirror and realize that you no longer recognize the person looking back. Physically, you've been perfected to a degree that would make sculptors weep with envy. Your skin has the luminous quality that comes from months of careful treatment with expensive oils and exotic unguents. Your hair falls in precisely calculated waves that suggest natural perfection while requiring hours of daily maintenance. Your body has been trained into a state of aesthetic fitness that combines athletic capability with decorative appeal. But it's the changes in your expression that are most striking. There's a calculation behind your eyes now, a constant assessment of angles and advantages that never quite switches off. Your smile has become a precision instrument, calibrated to convey exactly the right combination of warmth, intelligence, and appropriate deference. Even your casual gestures have acquired the studied naturalness that comes from months of performance. You've become beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, perfectly crafted for a specific purpose, flawless in execution, and somehow slightly inhuman in your polished perfection. The person you were 6 months ago would probably be horrified by what you've become. But that person also wouldn't have survived 6 days in your current environment, let alone 6 months. The transformation wasn't just aesthetic mired, it was adaptive. You became what your environment required you to become, and the alternative was destruction. Still, there are moments when you wonder what would have happened if you'd made different choices. What if you'd refused the initial assignments? What if you'd been less successful at reading political undercurrents? What if you'd maintained the boundaries between your performed self and your private thoughts more carefully? But these questions are academic now. You are who you are, in the position you're in, with the relationships and obligations and opportunities that define your current existence. The only relevant question is what you do next. The mirror shows you a person who has learned to thrive in a world of managed appearances and calculated relationships. You've mastered the art of being simultaneously valuable and vulnerable, influential and dependent, sophisticated and ornamental. You've become a work of art that can think, plan, and potentially act independently. The question is whether that independence is real or just another carefully maintained illusion. As your 6th month in this life draws to a close, Athens is preparing for the City Dionysia, the great festival that combines religious observance, theatrical competition, and political display in a celebration that will define the city's cultural and political mood for the coming year. For you, the festival represents both opportunity and danger. The theatrical competitions will bring together Athens' most prominent citizens for days of public celebration and private negotiation. The symposiums and private gatherings that accompany the festival will offer unprecedented access to the conversations that shape policy. But the heightened political activity also means increased scrutiny, more complex maneuvering, and greater risks for anyone whose loyalties might be questioned. Callias has been preparing for months, coordinating with other wealthy citizens to sponsor productions, planning entertainment for visiting dignitaries, and positioning himself to take advantage of whatever political opportunities the festival might create. Your role in these preparations has been significant. You've helped evaluate potential alliances, assessed the political implications of supporting different playwrights, and provided intelligence about the positions and intentions of other political households. But as the festival approaches, you're receiving increasing pressure from other parties who want to influence your activities during this crucial period. Alcibiades has made it clear that he expects you to attend certain private gatherings and report back on the conversations you observe. Representatives of other political factions have extended invitations that feel more like commands than requests. Even some of the other companions in Callias's household have begun asking pointed questions about your festival plans. You're beginning to realize that the city Dionysia won't just be a festival marred, it will be a test. Your actions during the celebration will be observed and analyzed by multiple parties, all of whom have different expectations for your behavior and different consequences in mind if you fail to meet those expectations. The festival will also mark a transition point in your development as a political operative. 6 months of careful preparation and gradual elevation have brought you to a position where you have real influence and genuine access to important information. But that position also makes you a target for people who see you as either a valuable asset to be acquired or a potential threat to be neutralized. As you prepare for what might be the most important week of your new life, you're forced to confront some fundamental questions about who you want to become and what price you're willing to pay for survival, success, and the possibility of something approaching freedom. The Festival of Dionysus celebrates transformation, the power of performance, and the thin line between reality and illusion. It seems appropriate that your own transformation will be tested during this celebration of change and possibility. But first you need to survive it. The city Dionysia arrives like a beautiful storm, transforming Athens into a theater where every citizen becomes both actor and audience in a drama whose script is being written in real time by forces you're only beginning to understand. The city explodes with color, sound, and barely contained energy. Banners flutter from every building, displaying the symbols of competing theatrical productions and political factions. The streets fill with visitors from across the Greek world, their different dialects and customs creating a cosmopolitan chaos that makes Athens feel like the center of civilization and a powder keg simultaneously. For the wealthy households, the festival is a showcase of cultural refinement and political influence. Callias has spared no expense in preparing for the week-long celebration. Your beauty routine has been intensified to the point where you're essentially a work of art that requires daily restoration. Your wardrobe for the festival includes garments so fine they're practically transparent, jewelry that could ransom a small city-state, and perfumes blended specifically to complement the spring air and create an aura of expensive sophistication. But beneath all the pageantry, you can feel the political tension crackling like electricity before a thunderstorm. This festival isn't just entertainment, it's a massive intelligence operation disguised as cultural celebration. Every gathering, every conversation, every casual encounter is an opportunity for information exchange, alliance building, or the subtle undermining of rivals. Your first major appearance is at the opening ceremony, where you accompany Callias in a procession that's part religious ritual, part fashion show, and part political demonstration. The wealthy citizens compete to display their devotion to Dionysus through increasingly elaborate demonstrations of piety and prosperity. You walk beside Callias wearing enough gold to buy a warship, looking like a god who's decided to vacation among mortals for purely recreational purposes. The crowds that line the procession route are a mix of citizens, visitors, and people whose loyalties and intentions aren't immediately clear. You've been trained to observe while appearing to simply enjoy the spectacle, and what you observe is concerning. There are too many conversations that stop when your group passes, too many glances that linger a bit too long, too many people who seem more interested in cataloguing the political alignments of the procession participants than in celebrating the god of wine and transformation. As the ceremony concludes and the serious socializing begins, you realize that the next week will be the most important of your new life. Every decision you make, every conversation you have, every alliance you acknowledge or ignore will be analyzed and remembered. The Festival of Dionysus celebrates transformation and the blurring of boundaries between reality and performance, but for you the performance has become reality, and transformation might be the only path to survival. The theatrical competitions begin with fanfare that can be heard across the city, but the real drama is happening in the private boxes, where Athens' elite gather to see and be seen while evaluating each other's political positions and cultural sophistication. Kilias has secured one of the premium viewing areas, a marble-lined box that provides excellent sightlines to both the stage and the other prominent citizens in attendance. You're positioned where your beauty and evident education serve as testimonials to your owner's excellent taste, while your keen observation skills catalogue the political undercurrents flowing through the audience. The play being performed is Sophocles' latest work, a complex tragedy that uses mythological themes to comment on contemporary political issues. But the real performance is happening in the audience, where every gesture, every conversation, every public display of approval or disapproval becomes a statement of political position. You watch Alcibiades holding court in his family's box, surrounded by young aristocrats, who hang on his every word with the devotion of disciples following a charismatic prophet. His commentary on the play is brilliant, insightful, and subtly subversive, questioning authority structures and traditional values with the kind of intellectual sophistication that makes dangerous ideas seem like harmless philosophy. In another section, Nicias sits with military commanders and conservative politicians, their discussions focused on practical concerns about Athens' ongoing conflicts and the need for stable leadership in uncertain times. Their reactions to the play's more radical themes are noticeably cooler, and their body language suggests they view the theatrical competitions as dangerous forums for spreading ideas that undermine social order. Between these two poles, dozens of other political figures position themselves according to calculations that involve family histories, economic interests, military obligations, and personal ambitions spanning back generations. You're beginning to understand that Athenian politics isn't just about current issues, it's about managing relationships and rivalries that predate the democracy itself. During the intermission, the real networking begins. The audience mingles in carefully choreographed social dances where every interaction serves multiple purposes. You accompany Kilias as he makes his rounds, contributing to conversations about the play's artistic merits while mentally cataloguing every political subtext and personal revelation that emerges during seemingly casual discussions. It's during one of these conversations that you notice something troubling. Several of the other companions present missed and beautiful young men from various wealthy households, seem to be asking similar questions and showing interest in the same topics. It's subtle, but there's a pattern to their inquiries that suggests coordination. Someone is using the festival as cover for a systematic intelligence-gathering operation, and you're either part of it or a target of it. Possibly both. The third night of the festival brings the most exclusive social event of the celebration, a private symposium, hosted jointly by several prominent families at a villa overlooking the harbor. The guest list reads like a directory of Athens' most powerful citizens, and the evening promises to be either the pinnacle of your social success or the beginning of your spectacular downfall. Preparation takes hours. You're bathed in water infused with rare oils, your skin polished until it gleams like marble, your hair arranged in a style that suggests both classical refinement and contemporary sophistication. Your chiton is woven from silk so fine it moves like liquid light, and your jewelry includes pieces that are literally museum-quality artifacts from earlier centuries. But the real preparation is mental. Kilias briefs you on the evening's objectives, the conversations you should steer towards certain topics, the relationships you should observe and report on. You're not just attending a party, you're conducting an intelligence operation in plain sight of some of the most perceptive and dangerous people in the ancient world. The villa is a masterpiece of architectural intimidation, designed to remind visitors of their host's wealth, taste, and power. The gardens are illuminated with hundreds of oil lamps, creating an atmosphere that's both magical and vaguely threatening. The dining area overlooks the harbor where Athens' naval power sits at anchor, a not-so-subtle reminder of the military foundation underlying the city's cultural achievements. The evening begins with the ritual formality, libations to the gods, welcoming speeches that are masterpieces of diplomatic doublespeak, and the careful choreography of seating arrangements that position each guest according to their current political standing and social importance. You're placed at a couch that provides access to conversations involving several different political factions while maintaining your clear association with Kilius's interests. It's a position that requires diplomatic skill to navigate successfully, and you quickly realize that every word you speak will be analyzed for political significance by multiple parties with conflicting interests. The conversation flows across topics with the fluid sophistication of genuine intellectual discourse, but you've learned to recognize the underlying patterns. Seemingly abstract discussions of justice and virtue are actually debates about specific policy proposals. Analysis of historical events serves as coded commentary on current military campaigns. Even aesthetic judgments about art and literature carry political implications that resonate throughout the room. As the evening progresses and the wine flows more freely, the conversations become both more revealing and more dangerous. Someone mentions concerns about the loyalty of certain allied city-states. Someone else shares rumors about Persian gold financing anti-Athenian activities in the Peloponnese. A young aristocrat makes comments about the need for new leadership that stop just short of outright sedition. You contribute carefully, offering insights that demonstrate your education and political awareness while avoiding positions that could be construed as disloyal to any of the major factions present. It's like walking through a minefield while reciting poetry. One wrong step and you explode. But the performance must continue flawlessly throughout. That's when Alcibiades approaches your couch for a private conversation that everyone in the room pretends not to observe while hanging on every word. "Walk with me," Alcibiades says quietly, and it's not really a request. You excuse yourself from the ongoing conversation about the philosophical implications of Sophocles' latest tragedy, and follow him to a secluded corner of the garden, where the sound of the harbor, lapping against the shore, provides cover for private discussion. He's been drinking, but his eyes are sharp and calculating. In the lamplight, his beauty is almost supernatural, the kind of physical perfection that suggests divine intervention in the reproductive process. But there's something predatory about his smile that reminds you that beautiful things in ancient Greece are often the most dangerous. "You've done well for yourself," he begins, his tone conversational, but loaded with subtext. "6 months ago, you were nobody. Tonight you're contributing meaningfully to discussions that shape the fate of Athens." That kind of rapid advancement requires either exceptional talent or exceptional patronage. I suspect it's both. You thank him for the compliment while trying to calculate where this conversation is heading and what response would best serve your interests. With Alcibiades, every interaction is a test, and failing his tests can have consequences that extend far beyond hurt feelings. "Callias is a good man," he continues, "but his vision is limited. He thinks in terms of maintaining the current balance of power, preserving existing relationships, managing change rather than directing it. These are the instincts of someone who has prospered under the current system and fears losing what he's gained. This is dangerous territory. Criticizing your owner, even indirectly, could be construed as disloyalty, but failing to engage with Alcibiades' analysis could be seen as intellectual limitation or political naivety. You respond with a carefully neutral observation about the value of stability in uncertain times. "Stability," he repeats, and there's amusement in his voice. An interesting choice of words. "Tell me, do you think Athens is stable? Do you think our empire can maintain itself through conservative management and careful diplomacy? Do you think the forces arrayed against us will be impressed by our commitment to traditional values and moderate policies?" The questions are rhetorical, but they're also a test of your political sophistication. He wants to know if you understand the strategic challenges facing Athens, if you're capable of thinking beyond the immediate interests of your current household, if you have the intellectual capacity and moral flexibility to consider more dramatic solutions to complex problems. You offer a response that acknowledges the challenges he's identified while stopping short of endorsing any specific alternative approaches. It's a diplomatic masterpiece that says everything and nothing simultaneously. "Exactly," he says, and his smile suggests that your careful neutrality has revealed more about your capabilities than a direct answer would have. You understand the game. The question is whether you're content to be a piece on someone else's board, or whether you'd prefer to make moves of your own. This is it. The moment you've been anticipating and dreading for months, the offer that could elevate you to genuine political influence, or destroy everything you've built since awakening in silk sheets 6 months ago. Alcibiades is offering you independence, agency, the chance to shape events rather than simply observe them. But independence from Callias would mean dependence on Alcibiades. And you've heard enough stories about his previous associates to know that working for him is like riding a beautiful but unpredictable horse that might carry you to victory or throw you off a cliff, depending on its mood. I'm honored by your confidence, you say carefully, but my current arrangements have been quite satisfactory. For now, he agrees, but arrangements change. Political fortunes shift. The skills that make you valuable to Callias today might make you indispensable to Athens tomorrow. The question is whether you'll be ready when that moment arrives. He doesn't wait for a response. Instead, he hands you a small scroll sealed with wax that bears his personal mark. Read this when you're alone. Consider the possibilities, and remember that the greatest risk isn't in choosing the wrong side, it's in failing to choose at all when choosing becomes necessary. With that, he returns to the main gathering, leaving you standing in the garden, holding what might be either your salvation or your death warrant. Back in your private chambers after the symposium, you stare at Alcibiades' sealed scroll for nearly an hour, before finding the courage to break the wax. The document inside is brief, written in his distinctive hand, and contains information that could change the course of Athenian history. It's a detailed outline of a proposed military expedition against Syracuse, the wealthy Sicilian city that has become a symbol of potential expansion for Athens' growing empire. But this isn't just a policy proposal, it's a strategic plan, complete with troop numbers, supply requirements, timeline estimates, and analysis of potential allies and enemies. It's the kind of classified military intelligence that should only exist in the private files of Athens' highest officials. The implications are staggering. Either Alcibiades has access to information from the very highest levels of Athenian government, or he's developed his own intelligence network that rivals the state's official capabilities. Either possibility makes him far more dangerous and far more valuable than you'd previously understood. But the document isn't just intelligence, it's also a test. By giving you access to this information, Alcibiades is evaluating your discretion, your political sophistication, and your potential usefulness for future operations. How you handle this knowledge will determine whether he views you as a potential asset or a security risk that needs to be managed. The military analysis itself is brilliant. Alcibiades has identified weaknesses in Syracuse's defensive capabilities, potential allies among Sicily's other Greek colonies, and strategic opportunities that could give Athens control over one of the Mediterranean's most important commercial centers. If successfully executed, the expedition could provide resources that would secure Athens' dominance for generations. But the plan also reveals a level of ambition that goes far beyond anything Callias has ever contemplated. This isn't about maintaining Athens' current position or managing existing relationships. It's about fundamentally reshaping the balance of power in the Greek world through bold military action and strategic risk-taking. You understand now why Alcibiades views Callias' approach as inadequate. Conservative management won't be sufficient if Athens faces enemies willing to take dramatic risks and make revolutionary changes to achieve their objectives. The choice isn't between stability and change, it's between controlled change and chaotic change, between Athenian initiative and Athenian reaction. The question is whether you're prepared to become part of Alcibiades' vision for Athens, with all the opportunities and dangers that involvement would entail. You carefully memorize the document's contents before burning it in your oil lamp, watching the parchment curl and blacken as the information becomes part of your mental repository of dangerous knowledge. The physical evidence is gone, but the implications remain, and you know that your decision about how to respond will determine the trajectory of your life for years to come. Sleep doesn't come easily that night. You lie in your silk sheets staring at the ceiling frescoes depicting gods and heroes, wondering if you're destined to become a figure in someone else's epic story, or if you have the courage and capability to author your own narrative in this world of beautiful, dangerous, ambitious people who treat human lives like chess pieces in games, whose rules are constantly changing. Dawn brings summons from Callias, who has observed your late-night conversation with Alcibiades and wants to understand what was discussed. You find him in his private study, surrounded by the scrolls, maps and correspondence that form the documentary foundation of his political activities. He's dressed simply for the early hour, but his expression carries the weight of someone who's spent the night calculating risks and considering responses to developments beyond his immediate control. The festival has created opportunities, but it's also exposed vulnerabilities, and your interaction with his potential rival has implications that extend far beyond social pleasantries. Alcibiades was quite attentive last evening, he begins, his tone neutral but alert. I trust the conversation was enlightening. This is the moment when your carefully cultivated diplomatic skills become either salvation or destruction. You need to provide enough information to demonstrate loyalty and transparency while protecting both Alcibiades' secrets and your own strategic options. It's like performing surgery on yourself while maintaining a pleasant expression and making intelligent conversation. You describe the interaction honestly but selectively, emphasizing Alcibiades' general observations about Athenian politics, while omitting the specific offer in the classified document. Your account portrays the conversation as flattering attention from an influential figure rather than a recruitment attempt by someone with access to state secrets. Callias listens carefully, occasionally asking questions that probe for additional details or inconsistencies in your narrative. He's evaluating both the content of what you're telling him and the manner in which you're presenting the information. Your performance needs to satisfy his immediate concerns while maintaining his confidence in your continued loyalty and discretion. He's a dangerous man, Callias says finally, but not necessarily an enemy. His ambitions exceed his current position, which makes him both valuable as an ally and threatening as a rival. Your interaction with him was appropriate, but future contact should be managed carefully. The conversation continues with a broader discussion of festival observations and political intelligence gathering. You report on the conversations you've observed, the relationships you've catalogued, and the undercurrents of tension and opportunity that characterize the social gatherings. It's a comprehensive intelligence briefing that demonstrates your value while reinforcing your position within Callias's political household. But as the discussion progresses, you become aware of information gaps in Callias's understanding of current political developments. He knows less about some military planning activities than Alcibiades' document suggested, and his analysis of certain political relationships seems outdated compared to what you've observed during the festival. This realization is both reassuring and troubling. It suggests that your current position, while secure, might not provide access to the most important political developments shaping Athens' future. But it also indicates that other intelligence networks are operating beyond Callias's awareness, and your potential value to those networks might be greater than you'd previously understood. The festival's final days pass in a blur of theatrical competitions, political maneuvering, and social performances that require you to be simultaneously authentic and artificial, engaged and detached, loyal and calculating. You attend symposiums, contribute to discussions, gather intelligence, and maintain the careful balance of relationships that defines your position in Athenian high society. But beneath the surface performances, you're conducting a more complex evaluation of your situation and options. The information Alcibiades shared has given you a perspective on Athenian politics that extends beyond Callias's immediate circle, while your growing network of contacts provides access to conversations and insights that could prove valuable in unexpected ways. You're also becoming aware of subtle changes in how other people respond to you. Some of the political figures you've met treat you with increased respect, as if your association with multiple influential households has elevated your perceived status. Other companions seem more wary, as if they recognize that your success makes you either a potential ally or a competitive threat. Most significantly, you notice that several conversations include casual references to future events and opportunities that suggest people are beginning to see you as someone with independent agency, rather than simply as Callias's decorative property. The transformation from ornamental asset to potential political actor has been gradual, but it's becoming increasingly visible to outside observers. This shift in perception creates new possibilities, but also new vulnerabilities. People with independent political value become targets for recruitment, manipulation, and elimination in ways that mere decorative objects don't. Your growing sophistication and expanding network make you more valuable, but they also make you more dangerous to people whose interests might conflict with your activities. The festival concludes with ceremonies that celebrate Dionysus's gifts of transformation, artistic inspiration, and the temporary suspension of normal social boundaries. As you participate in the final processions, wearing garments that cost more than most people's annual income, and looking like a divine messenger who's decided to vacation among mortals, you realize that the festival has indeed been transformative. 6 months ago, you woke up as property. Today you're walking through Athens as someone whose opinions matter, whose insights are sought after, and whose choices could influence the fate of the world's most powerful democracy. The transformation isn't complete. You're still dependent on Callias's protection and subject to the limitations of your social position, but the trajectory is clear. You're becoming someone who matters, and in ancient Greece, that's both the greatest opportunity and the greatest danger imaginable. 2 weeks after the festival, as Athens settles back into its normal rhythms of politics, commerce, and military preparation, you receive an invitation that changes everything. It arrives through channels so discreet that even identifying the messenger would be impossible, but the seal and signature leave no doubt about its origin. Alcibiades wants to meet privately, away from the social contexts where your interactions have been observed and analyzed by multiple interested parties. The location he suggests is a private villa outside Athens, and the timing indicates that this isn't a casual social encounter. You inform Callias that you've been invited to attend a small gathering of young intellectuals, discussing philosophy and poetry, a half-truth that explains your absence without revealing the meeting's actual significance. He approves the excursion with the casual confidence of someone who trusts your judgment and values your continued development as a sophisticated companion. The villa overlooks the olive groves that surround Athens, far enough from the city to ensure privacy, but close enough to return quickly, if circumstances require. As you approach the entrance, you realize that you're about to have a conversation that could determine the rest of your life. Alcibiades greets you alone, which is itself significant. The absence of other companions, servants or observers, indicates that whatever he wants to discuss is too sensitive for even his most trusted associates to overhear. He's dressed simply but expensively, and his manner suggests both relaxation and intense focus. "I'm glad you came," he says, leading you to a terrace where wine and food have been prepared. "I wasn't certain you would." The conversation begins with seemingly casual topics: observations about the festival, commentary on recent theatrical productions, discussion of philosophical questions that have been circulating among Athens's intellectual elite. But you can feel the underlying tension, the sense that these preliminary topics are preparation for more significant revelations. Finally, as the sun begins to set over the olive groves, Alcibiades transitions to the real purpose of the meeting. "Athens is changing," he says quietly. "The empire we've built through military success and political skill is facing challenges that require new approaches, new leadership, and new ways of thinking about our place in the world. The old methods, diplomacy, conservative management, gradual adaptation won't be sufficient for what's coming." He pauses, studying your reaction to his words. You maintain the careful neutrality that's become your diplomatic signature, encouraging him to continue without committing to any particular response. "The Sicilian expedition isn't just a military opportunity," he continues. "It's a test of Athens' willingness to embrace its destiny as the dominant power in the Mediterranean world. But success will require more than military planning and political approval. It will require intelligence networks, diplomatic initiatives, and strategic thinking that goes beyond the capabilities of our current leadership. This is it. The moment when casual conversation becomes explicit recruitment, when philosophical discussion transforms into political conspiracy, when your carefully maintained position between competing factions becomes untenable. I'm offering you a role in shaping Athens' future, Alcibiades says directly. Not as someone's decorative companion, but as an active participant in the decisions that will determine whether our democracy survives and prospers, or declines into irrelevance. The offer is everything you've been working toward and everything you've been trying to avoid. Independence, agency, genuine political influence, but at the cost of the security and relationships you've spent months building. And with Alcibiades, success and destruction often occupy the same territory, separated only by circumstances beyond anyone's control. You ask for time to consider his offer, and Alcibiades agrees with the gracious confidence of someone who's accustomed to getting what he wants eventually. But as you return to Athens through the olive groves in the gathering darkness, you know that considering the proposition is just a polite way of describing the impossible calculation you need to make. The ride back to the city gives you time to think through the implications of accepting or refusing Alcibiades' offer. Both choices carry risks that could destroy everything you've built, and both offer opportunities that could elevate you beyond your current circumstances. Accepting would mean betraying Callias's trust, abandoning the security of your established position, and allying yourself with someone whose political ambitions are matched only by his willingness to take risks that could result in exile, death, or worse. But it would also mean genuine independence, access to the highest levels of political decision-making, and the chance to help shape policies that affect the entire Greek world. Refusing would preserve your current relationships, and maintain the steady progress you've made toward a secure position in Athenian society. But it would also mean remaining dependent on others' decisions, accepting the limitations of your current status, and potentially missing the opportunity to achieve something approaching genuine freedom. Back in your private chambers, you realize that the choice isn't really between Callias and Alcibiades, it's between different versions of yourself and different visions of what your life could become. The person who accepts Alcibiades' offer will be taking the first step toward becoming someone you can barely imagine. The person who refuses will be choosing to remain the sophisticated, valuable, but ultimately dependent creature you've become over the past 6 months. Both paths lead to uncertain destinations, but only one offers the possibility of writing your own story rather than serving as a character in someone else's narrative. You spend most of the night walking through the rooms of Callias's house, looking at the luxury and beauty that surround you, remembering the terror and confusion of your first days in this world, calculating the distance between who you were and who you've become. 6 months ago, survival seemed like the only reasonable goal. Tonight, survival feels like surrender to limitations you're no longer willing to accept. As dawn approaches, you make your decision. The message you send to Alcibiades is brief. I accept your offer and look forward to serving Athens in whatever capacity you deem appropriate. The response arrives within hours, equally brief but loaded with implications. Excellent. Arrangements will be made. Be prepared for significant changes to your current situation. There's no going back now. You've committed yourself to a path whose destination you can't predict, and whose risks you can only partially understand. But for the first time since awakening in silk sheets 7 months ago, you feel like you're making choices rather than simply adapting to circumstances created by others. The next few days pass in carefully managed normalcy. You continue your usual routines with Callias, attend the social gatherings expected of your position, and maintain the relationships that have defined your place in Athenian society. But beneath the surface, you're preparing for a transformation that will make your previous metamorphosis from whatever you were before to sophisticated companion seem modest by comparison. Alcibiades' arrangements begin to materialize gradually. Invitations to exclusive gatherings where you meet people whose names you recognize from political discussions but whose faces have been unfamiliar. Private conversations that provide context for policy decisions you've observed but never understood. Access to information that reveals the sophisticated intelligence networks operating throughout the Mediterranean world. You begin to understand that your new role won't simply involve gathering information for Alcibiades. You'll be helping to create and execute strategies that could reshape the balance of power between Athens, Sparta, Persia, and the other forces competing for dominance in the ancient world. The realization that you're becoming a participant in historical events rather than just an observer of political theater is both exhilarating and terrifying. The decisions you make over the coming months won't just affect your personal circumstances, they could influence the fate of thousands of people and the future of Athenian democracy itself. 2 weeks after accepting Alcibiades' offer, the moment arrives when you must inform Callias of your changing circumstances. You've planned the conversation carefully, hoping to minimize damage to a relationship that's been crucial to your survival and development, but knowing that betrayal, however diplomatically presented, inevitably creates wounds that never fully heal. You find Callias in his study reviewing correspondence from his mining operations, surrounded by the documents and calculations that quantify his political influence in terms of silver talents and commercial relationships. He looks up as you enter, and something in your expression immediately alerts him that this isn't a routine report on social observations or household matters. "There's something I need to discuss with you," you begin, and the careful formality of your words eliminates any possibility that this conversation will be pleasant for either of you. He sets aside his scrolls and gives you his complete attention, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he recognizes the significance of the moment. You've rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but facing the reality of disappointing someone whose trust and patronage have shaped your entire existence makes eloquent explanations seem inadequate. You explain that you've been offered opportunities for advancement that would require changes to your current arrangements. You emphasize your gratitude for everything he's provided, your respect for his judgment and guidance, your hope that your association can continue in modified form even as your circumstances evolve. What you don't mention is Alcibiades' name, the specific nature of the opportunities you've been offered, or the implications your departure might have for Callias's own political activities. Some truths are too dangerous to share, even in moments of attempted honesty. Callias listens without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts or reactions. When you finish speaking, the silence stretches long enough to become uncomfortable before he responds. "I see," he says finally, and those two words carry the weight of disappointment, calculation, and resignation. "And these opportunities, they require your immediate departure from my household." You nod, knowing that any attempt to soften the reality would only make the situation more painful for both of you. "Then I wish you success in your new endeavors," he says with the formal courtesy that wealthy Greeks use to maintain dignity in difficult situations. "Your service here has been exemplary, and I hope your future associations prove equally satisfactory." The conversation continues for a few more minutes, covering practical arrangements for your departure and the disposition of property that's been assigned to your use. But the real content of the exchange has been communicated. You're choosing to leave, he's choosing to let you go with grace, and both of you understand that this decision changes your relationship permanently. As you prepare to leave his study, Callias offers one final observation that stays with you long after the conversation ends: be careful who you choose to trust with your future. Not everyone who offers opportunities for advancement has your best interests at heart. Your transition from Callias's household to Alcibiades' sphere of influence happens with surprising speed and efficiency. Within a week, you're established in new quarters that reflect your elevated status, not as someone's decorative property, but as an independent agent with your own resources and responsibilities. The physical changes to your circumstances are significant. Your new residence is smaller than Callias's magnificent house, but located in a district that indicates serious political connections. Your wardrobe has been updated to reflect your new role. Mime is still expensive and carefully chosen, but with an emphasis on authority rather than ornamental beauty. You still employ servants, but now they answer to you rather than managing you for someone else's benefit. But the psychological transformation is even more dramatic. For the first time since awakening in silk sheets 8 months ago, you wake up each morning with genuine autonomy over your daily activities. Your schedule is determined by political necessities rather than someone else's social calendar. Your conversations serve your own purposes rather than simply gathering intelligence for another person's benefit. The work itself proves to be intellectually engaging in ways that your previous role never was. Instead of simply observing political discussions, you're helping to plan strategy sessions. Rather than just reporting on what other people decide, you're contributing to the decisions that shape Athens' policies. Your insights and analysis matter because they influence actions that affect real outcomes. Alcibiades proves to be a demanding but rewarding patron whose approach to political operations is both more sophisticated and more dangerous than anything you experienced with Callias. His network of contacts extends throughout the Mediterranean world. His strategic thinking operates on timescales measured in decades rather than months, and his willingness to take calculated risks creates opportunities that more conservative approaches would never generate. Your role in this network evolves rapidly as Alcibiades recognizes your capabilities and begins assigning increasingly complex and sensitive responsibilities. You're not just gathering information anymore, you're analyzing intelligence from multiple sources, developing strategic recommendations, and occasionally conducting delicate negotiations that require discretion and diplomatic skill. The Sicilian expedition planning occupies much of your attention during these early weeks. The project is far more ambitious and complex than the brief document you read during the festival suggested. Success would require coordinating military operations with diplomatic initiatives, managing supply lines across hundreds of miles of hostile territory, and maintaining political support in Athens for a campaign that could last several years. Your contributions to the planning process focus on intelligence analysis and strategic assessment, evaluating potential allies and enemies, identifying vulnerabilities in enemy positions, and calculating the resources required for various operational scenarios. It's exactly the kind of work you'd imagine during your months as a decorative companion, but the reality proves to be more challenging and more consequential than your fantasies suggested. 3 months into your new life, you're beginning to understand that independence in ancient Greek politics isn't freedom, it's just a different type of dependence, with more complex terms and conditions. Your relationship with Alcibiades provides autonomy and influence, but it also creates obligations and expectations that are in some ways more demanding than your previous role as Callias's companion. Success requires not just intelligence and diplomatic skill, but also the ability to anticipate his needs, understand his long-term objectives, and execute complex assignments with minimal guidance or supervision. The stakes are also considerably higher. Mistakes in your previous role might have resulted in social embarrassment or temporary disfavor. Errors in your current position could contribute to military disasters, political upheavals, or diplomatic crises that affect thousands of lives. The intellectual challenges are more stimulating, but the pressure is correspondingly more intense. You're also learning to navigate the complex web of relationships that surrounds any significant political figure in Athens. Alcibiades' associates include military commanders, wealthy merchants, foreign diplomats, and political figures, whose own networks extend throughout the Greek world. Managing relationships with all these parties requires diplomatic skills that go far beyond anything your previous training provided. Some of these relationships prove to be genuinely collaborative, people whose interests align with yours, and who provide mutual support for shared objectives. Others are purely transactional, temporary alliances based on immediate convenience rather than long-term trust. A few are actively hostile, individuals who view your success as threatening to their own positions, and who work to undermine your effectiveness through subtle sabotage or direct confrontation. The most challenging relationships are those that fall into multiple categories simultaneously. People who are allies on some issues but competitors on others, whose support you need for current projects but whose long-term objectives conflict with yours, whose personal loyalty to Alcibiades makes them natural associates, but whose professional ambitions make them potential rivals for influence and resources. Managing these complex dynamics requires a level of strategic thinking that goes beyond simple political calculation. You need to understand not just what people want, but why they want it, how their desires might change under different circumstances, and what combination of incentives and pressures might align their interests with yours when direct cooperation isn't possible. The learning curve is steep, and the consequences of miscalculation are severe, but after months of careful observation and gradual development, you're beginning to master the skills required for genuine political effectiveness in the world's most sophisticated democracy. Your success hasn't gone unnoticed. Other political figures have begun approaching you directly rather than working through Alcibiades, recognizing that you've developed independent value as an analyst, strategist, and diplomatic intermediary. These overtures are flattering and potentially valuable, but they also represent a new category of risk. Alcibiades tolerates and even encourages your growing network of contacts because it enhances your usefulness to his operations. But there's an implicit understanding that your primary loyalty remains with him, and that any independent relationships serve his broader objectives rather than competing with them. Maintaining this balance while building genuine political influence requires diplomatic finesse that would challenge even experienced statesmen. The winter months bring intensive preparation for the Sicilian expedition. The project has received preliminary approval from the Assembly, but final authorization depends on resolving complex questions about resources, command structure and strategic objectives that continue to generate heated debate among Athens' political elite. Your role in these preparations has evolved from analysis and planning to active participation in the political maneuvering required to secure support for the expedition. You attend strategy meetings with military commanders, conduct discreet negotiations with potential allies, and help craft the arguments and incentives needed to maintain assembly support for the ambitious undertaking. It's during this period that you fully realize how far you've traveled from the confused, terrified person who woke up in silk sheets 9 months ago. You're now someone whose opinions influence military planning, whose analyses shape diplomatic strategy, and whose recommendations affect resource allocation for projects that could determine Athens' future as a Mediterranean power. Spring arrives with news that changes everything. Sparta has formed a new alliance with Persian forces, creating a strategic threat that makes the Sicilian expedition both more necessary and more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The intelligence reaches Athens through channels so sensitive that only a handful of people have access to the full implications, and you're among them. The information comes during a private meeting at Alcibiades' villa, where the city's most influential figures gather to assess the new strategic reality and determine Athens' response. You sit among generals, admirals, wealthy merchants, and political leaders whose decisions will shape the fate of the ancient world, contributing to discussions as an equal rather than an observer. The debate is intense and revealing. Conservative voices argue for defensive strategies that prioritize protecting Athens' existing territories, rather than pursuing expansion in Sicily. Military commanders emphasize the resource constraints that make fighting on multiple fronts extremely dangerous. Merchants worry about the economic implications of prolonged warfare, with uncertain outcomes. But Alcibiades makes the case that the new alliance between Sparta and Persia makes bold action necessary, rather than merely desirable. Athens can't defend its empire through passive measures when facing enemies willing to take revolutionary risks. The Sicilian expedition isn't just an opportunity for expansion, it's become essential for securing the resources needed to survive the coming conflict. Your contribution to the discussion focuses on intelligence analysis and strategic assessment. The Persian involvement changes the timeline for decision-making, the resources required for success, and the consequences of failure. But it also creates opportunities for diplomatic initiatives that could divide Athens' enemies and provide advantages that purely military approaches couldn't achieve. As the meeting progresses, you realize that you're witnessing the moment when abstract political theories transform into concrete policies that will determine the lives and deaths of thousands of people. The intellectual stimulation of political analysis becomes secondary to the moral weight of participating in decisions whose consequences extend far beyond your personal circumstances. The Sicilian expedition receives final authorization 2 weeks later, with Alcibiades appointed as one of 3 commanding generals. The vote in the assembly is closer than expected, reflecting genuine concerns about the risks involved, but the combination of strategic necessity and persuasive advocacy proves sufficient to secure approval for the ambitious undertaking. Your role in the expedition planning continues through the summer, as Athens mobilizes resources for what will be the largest military operation in the democracy's history. Ships are constructed, supplies gathered, alliances negotiated, and strategies refined through countless meetings where your insights and recommendations help shape the complex undertaking. But as departure approaches, you're forced to confront a question that's been lurking beneath the surface of your political success. What do you actually want from this extraordinary life you've built? The expedition offers opportunities for advancement and influence that could establish you as a permanent figure in Athenian politics. Success in Sicily would provide resources and prestige that could secure your position regardless of changing political fortunes. You could return to Athens as someone whose contributions to the democracy's greatest triumph make you indispensable to its continued prosperity. But success would also mean permanent commitment to a world whose values and assumptions you still struggle to fully accept. The slavery, the casual violence, the treatment of women as property, the imperial exploitation of weaker cities, these aspects of ancient Greek civilization remain morally troubling, despite your adaptation to their political and social manifestations. The night before the expedition's departure, You walk through Athens's moonlit streets for what might be the last time. The city is quiet, but you can feel the tension and anticipation that accompany any great undertaking, whose outcome will determine the fate of everyone involved. You pass the agora, where you first learn to navigate Athenian society, the gymnasium, where you develop the physical conditioning required for your various roles, the theatre, where you witness the political dramas that shaped your understanding of power and influence. Each location holds memories of transformation, adaptation, and gradual mastery of skills you never imagined needing. But as you return to your residence to prepare for departure, you realize that the most significant transformation hasn't been your adaptation to ancient Greek society. It's been your evolution from someone who survived by accepting circumstances beyond their control to someone who actively shapes the circumstances that determine their future. 9 months ago, you woke up as property. Tomorrow you sail for Sicily as someone whose decisions could influence the course of Mediterranean history. The journey has required compromises and adaptations that would have seemed impossible during your first terrified days in this world. But it's also provided opportunities for agency and achievement that exceed anything you could have imagined. The expedition departs at dawn with fanfare that befits Athens's greatest military adventure. As your ship clears the harbor and the familiar coastline fades into the morning haze, you understand that you're leaving behind not just a place, but an entire version of yourself. The confused, dependent creature who survived through adaptation and careful observation. The person sailing towards Sicily is someone who belongs in this world of beautiful, dangerous, ambitious people who treat historical events as personal opportunities for glory, wealth, and power. Whether that transformation represents growth or corruption, success or failure, liberation, or loss of something essential about your original identity. These questions remain unanswered as the Athenian fleet sets course for its destiny in the western Mediterranean. But for the first time since awakening in silk sheets almost a year ago, you're sailing toward that destiny as an active participant in shaping it rather than a passive observer of forces beyond your control. And in a world where individual agency is rare and precious, that transformation may, regardless of its ultimate consequences, represents a victory worth celebrating. The future remains uncertain, dangerous, and full of possibilities you can't predict. But it's a future you'll face as someone who matters, someone whose choices influence outcomes, someone who has learned to thrive in one of history's most challenging and sophisticated civilizations. As Athens disappears behind you and Sicily beckons ahead, you allow yourself a moment of satisfaction at how far you've traveled from the terrified confusion of your first morning in the ancient world. Whatever awaits in Sicily, whatever challenges the expedition might face, whatever political upheavals might reshape the Mediterranean balance of power, you'll meet them as someone who has mastered the art of transformation and discovered that adaptation and authenticity aren't mutually exclusive. The silk sheets that once seemed like luxury in prison have been replaced by the deck of a warship sailing toward historical significance. It's a trade you never expected to make, but one that represents everything you've learned about survival, success, and the price of freedom in a world where both opportunity and destruction arrive without warning and demand immediate, decisive responses. The story that began with awakening as someone else's property continues as a journey towards self-determination in the most unlikely of circumstances. And that continuation, regardless of its ultimate destination, represents a triumph of human adaptability and the persistent possibility of agency even in the most constrained and dangerous situations. Your odyssey through ancient Athens ends not with resolution, but with departure toward new challenges that will test everything you've learned about power, politics, and the complex relationship between survival and authenticity in a world that rewards both adaptation and ambition with equal measures of opportunity and peril.